Well, we might get underway, and others who join us will just join us, like they've walked into the Edwards Hall 5 minutes late or whatever. That's fine. They can do the same with this. I'll just have to keep an eye on the Zoom thing. Basically, firstly, you need to be aware this is being recorded to make a video, so the people that can't join us on Zoom can perhaps still see the video. The other thing, as I just mentioned, a good idea for people to leave their audio off until they're ready to say something. And then one way of getting my attention is to try and wave your hand or something, because at the moment it's easy, but as the numbers of people increase, it's going to be trickier for me to keep an eye on who might be wanting to speak. So basically just turn your microphone on and interrupt might be the other fallback position if I don't respond to a waving hand. So we're going to basically function by me screen sharing a PowerPoint file, but in the background, so there'll just be a little, for me, there'll just be a little row of names down the side, which is why it'll be a bit trickier. So let me, oh no, let's do it the right way. Let's go into screen share. Go into that one. Okay. So when I go play, this should now, you should all be seeing a big black and white photo of the cathedral. And I've got just a little row of images down the side of my screen that I'll try and keep an eye on as best I can. Okay. So let's get into it and try our first online parish forum. I thought there would be more participants than this, but we can go ahead, have the conversation, create the video which others can pick up in a less challenging way later in the week. The somber tones of that image are not anything particular. I just thought instead of being bright and cheery with lots of jacarandas, let's have a nighttime view. This was a photo taken by David Ford a year or so back, and he sent it to me as a black and white. It's quite attractive in its own way. So I can just do this by hitting the arrow since I'm sitting at a real computer. I wanted to start just by putting up front, as it were, highlighting who the ministry team. Now there are many other people do lots of other things in the background, but just in terms of ministry team, that cast of characters that's on your screen at the moment says something about the sort of vitality of what's going on at the cathedral. So you've got the dean, okay, we know he's here. You've got Camelia, who does all kinds of stuff with, you could almost say old things and old people, but I mean, she does the heritage stuff, but she also looks after lots and lots of the pastoral care, particularly around nursing homes and funeral time, and a whole lot more as well, but they're her two particular portfolios. Leanne is, of course, the person driving our ministry with children, family and youth, and I'll come back to that. But the fact that we have such a person on staff is really significant. Put Grant up there because in a few weeks' time, Grant will be our deacon. And we haven't had a deacon, a cathedral deacon, probably since Anne Solari was here, I'm guessing. So somebody whose ministry is to be a deacon, not to be a priest, not to be a trainee priest, but whose ministry is to show us and to help us discover what that aspect of ministry is about. Robert, and I think that might be an older photograph, Robert, but Robert, of course, is director of music and has been for, 21, 22 years now. But again, one of the major ministry roles in the cathedral, and we've seen that particularly during the COVID period, just how important Robert's role has been in managing and changing the dynamics there. Roger in the parish office. Now that role will change at the end of the year when Roger retires, but Roger, of course, has been doing that probably for about 10 years now, I'd be guessing. Whether we keep that office coordinator role going, we'll have to decide as we get towards the end of the year. And I put Moy in there because that's obviously pantry in the background, but Moy is really, for the first time in many years, we have somebody whose job it is to worry about the op shop and coordinate it and drive it and develop it along with the pantry and other activities. We'll come back to that later also. So just the people who are in named ministry roles, that's a really diverse and interesting bunch of people, and it says something about the life and vitality of the cathedral at the present time. That doesn't include the church wardens. It doesn't include Robbie doing the accounts. It doesn't include the people that make the bookshop happen, or indeed the team of people in the op shop and in other ways. It doesn't include Mark with all the work that he does around as verger and so on. So you can see the cathedral is a really diverse and interesting place with I think a really great ministry team. Good for me to be part of that. However, as we know, COVID came along, and I thought this sign outside a theatre, I guess, somewhere in the US, captures it well. The world, the theatre is called The World, or the cinema is called The World, but I love this sign. The world is temporarily closed. COVID has really knocked us for a six, as we know. And I've got a couple of quotes here from a Canadian whose name escapes me, but we'll see it towards the end of the quote. A Canadian anthropologist, sociologist, and these couple of lines stood out for me this week. Just a day you need a croaky voice. Never in our lives have we experienced such a global phenomenon. For the first time in the history of the world, all of humanity, informed by the unprecedented reach of digital technology, has come together, focused on the same existential threat, consumed by the same fears and uncertainties, eagerly anticipating the same as yet unrealized promises of medical science. I mean, there's never been a time when all of this has been happening. And I think this was his following paragraph. In a single season, civilization has been brought low by a microscopic parasite 10,000 times smaller than a grain of salt. I thought, yep, that captures it really, really well in all sorts of ways. COVID-19 attacks our physical bodies, but also the cultural foundation of our lives, the toolbox of community and connectivity. That is, for the human, what claws and teeth represent to the tiger. Fascinating insight from this particular person. It's Wade Davis, an anthropologist from the University of British Columbia. So it's no surprise that this is having an impact on the cathedral and having an impact, of course, on other parishes and other churches and other community groups all around the North Coast. So a brief heads up. Firstly, we're subject to New South Wales public health orders. When the health minister, or when the chief medical officer issues a public health order, they are compulsory. They're not suggestions. They're not things we might like to think about. And there's no point arguing the toss with the person. These are simply legal requirements under the emergency orders, and we either follow them or we have legal consequences to deal with. Our last so-called normal Sunday was March 15, the Ides of March, as it turned out. And by midweek, we were shutting things down.
Ides of March.
I think there might have been there might perhaps have been. I'm trying to activate the. Just no, wait. Let me get up there. I'm trying to see more of the people on the screen, but I can't get to them. We might have had the Wednesday morning service, but even that next Wednesday morning service, people that were arriving were bringing their own hand wash and were saying, what are we going to do about COVID? So by the end of the week, all public church services had stopped. Fortunately, partly because of some of the investment we'd already made, and mostly because of Grant and his technology, his skill, and his equipment. We were able to just live stream the whole service from the following Sunday, the 22nd of March, and we've done that every Sunday since. We set up the Pastoral Care Telephone Support Network, so people are getting rung every couple of weeks by somebody from Parish Council, and that's covering several hundred people, which is way more people, of course, than we ever have in church at any one time. And frankly, we couldn't fit them in if they all turned up at the one time. We'll talk about the Cathedral Pantry a bit later, but that was also part of our response to the anticipated impact of COVID on people, particularly people without much income support. And fortunately, the government stepped in with all kinds of measures to mitigate some of the impacts, but we know that there are still many, many people affected by this. Technology upgrades, Parish Council bit the bullet and went ahead, decided to get money with the approval of the diocese to invest in improvements of the sound system, installing cameras, installing lights, buying a computer to live in the cathedral and manage all these amazing bits of technology. And that is now all but finished. The only thing we've got to do is set up a proper desk for all these bits of equipment to live on. So today was our first regular Sunday with all the bits in place. And of course, as we know, from the first Sunday in June, we were able to have limited numbers of people at worship. And for that to happen, and for other things to happen, we've had to have COVID-safe plans, one for the cathedral, one for All Saints Church, one for the bookshop, another one for the op shop, one for the office, and another one for the parish centre. So there's been, and in some cases, they've had to be updated as the health orders have changed. Now I'm going to try dropping out of the screen share for a moment so I can actually see who's with us, and maybe take some questions.
Can Alex see himself?
Yes.
I'm getting... Okay, I've got a not exactly a frozen system, but the mouse is not able to get me out of this. Nope, that's not what I want to do. Okay. Okay, I just can't get control of the screen back, so that's really it. Hello, Derek.
Good morning, everybody.
We might just have to, I can't actually stop the screen share at the moment. I'm not sure why. So we'll just pause there. I won't be able to see everybody who might be with us, but if you've got any questions around COVID-19, this will be the point to ask them, I think. Then we'll move on to the next topic. Okay, I did have a question after church this morning from somebody asking when we're going to resume the Wednesday morning service. My answer was, well, we don't have any plans to do that just yet, for two reasons. One is that the people who typically come to that service are amongst the most high-risk category in the parish. They're all very elderly. And actually they should be, even if we open the service, they should be staying home. I mean, that's the advice from the state government. So as a matter of care and responsibility, we haven't resumed that service yet. I understand that St. Matthew's might have restarted at Wednesday morning service, but I'm simply reiterating the cathedral's taking the view that our first responsibility is to people's safety. And so at this point, we haven't opted to resume Wednesday services. Of course, there's extra cleaning and stuff, but that's really not an issue. Well, that can be dealt with. I think at the moment our primary consideration is simply when do we judge it a responsible thing to reopen a service that we would expect the 20 or so people to attend. So if people have questions around that, I'm certainly open to them. We're keen, Camelia and I are keen to get the Wednesday service going when Parish Council thinks it's wise. But for now, we've erred on the side of Wednesday morning service. That's exactly our older people service, and that's really not the group of people we should be encouraging to come back to church. But I'm very much open to comments or questions. Just make sure your microphone is on and talk, because I can't see everybody, because I'm running like 3 programs at once and I can't navigate between them at the moment. Okay. Well, we're probably all sick of COVID, a bit tired of COVID. So let's push on to the next. Okay, I'm actually going to have to restart my computer. I'm sorry, because it's not responding to any commands now. Won't even flick the. Oh, it's still taking that. Okay, apparently I can still change the screen. Let's see how we go. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was finances. Not surprisingly, COVID has had an impact on our finances. Alex is here and will be able to unpack any of this or elaborate on any questions people ask. I just wanted to highlight a couple of things which have been challenges for us financially. The next screen will have things that have actually gone quite well for us. And then the third screen just summarizes the money side of things. Let's see how we go, whether the technology can keep up with me. So, as we know, the op shop closed shortly after that Sunday. So it closed from basically the Friday, the 19th or so of March, and it didn't reopen until the 22nd or the 23rd of June. So it was actually closed for 13 weeks. And that meant we lost about $24,000 of income from the op shop. Okay, in that 3 months. Everybody can hear that? We've also, of course, had no hall hire for 5 months, but we don't make a lot of money, sadly, out of hall hire. So in terms of, and the numbers I'm using here are sort of from the July Parish Council financial reports. And so they're comparing us against where we would have been on our budget at the end of July. So we're about $1,000 behind where we thought we would be with income from hall hire. I actually think we're more than $1,000. I think the budget was underestimating. Well, turns out the budget was more correct than we realised. But we were hoping the income from the hall would be higher than basically $200 a month. That's not a very high income flow from the hall. But it's typical of what it's been for the last many years. Interesting, just the last week and this week, we were supposed to have a booking from the courts. They wanted to book the Edwards Hall every day, 5 days for 2 weeks, and they were going to pay us $500 a day. Unfortunately, that particular case went back to a judge-only trial, and so they didn't need the Edwards Hall as the jurors' room. So that was unfortunate for us. That would have given us $6,000 or $7,000 straight away. Of course, there's been no catering for funerals or any other functions, because basically there haven't been any other functions. So there's been no income from catering. There have been almost no funerals. So we're about $6,000 down on what we thought we would have by this time of the year from funerals. So there's $32,500 already. And the offerings are down. This is from the Parish Council report a couple of weeks ago. The end of July, offerings were about that's cash, pledges, envelopes, money in the wall safe, whatever. Offerings are down by about $5,500 as to where we budgeted them for that to be at the end of July. Okay. So that's, what's that, Derek? About 36,000 or something of income that we're behind where we thought we would be at the end of July, if it weren't for COVID. Okay. Clearly nobody's coming into the cathedral during the week. Nobody's making offerings through the wall safe. There have been no large services with baptisms or school events. So the cash offerings have dropped away to virtually nothing. All right, so they've been the main financial hits that we've taken due to COVID. And that doesn't even mention the fact that the insurance went from 40,000 to 75,000 this year. But we knew about that. This is just COVID. All right. The next thing is to look at things that actually have been helpful for us. The first is the JobKeeper program. We've already been on JobKeeper for 4 months. There's another 2 months of income which will come from that through to the end of September, and then some of it will trickle over into October. So we've benefited so far by about $10,000 because of JobKeeper. Okay. The parish pledge was waived by the diocese for all parishes, and in our case, that's roughly $2,000 a month. So for depending whether we're talking of 4 months or 5 months, that's either $8,000 or $10,000 helpful to cash flow. Obviously, the diocese has foregone a significant amount of income from the parishes, but that's actually been offset by the JobKeeper payments. The op shop reopened about 6 weeks ago, and although it's only open, it's not open on Wednesdays at this stage, but already it's operating at a much higher level of income than previously. And so from those 6 weeks, we've had $15,000 of sales from the op shop. So that's been helpful. We would have expected it in that period to be more like maybe somewhere between 10 and 12,000. So it's up quite considerably than what it had been previously.
Greg, is that because of FPOS, or what do you attribute that to?
Part of it may be FPOS. It may also, part of it, well, it's directly related to turnover, of course, but that's obvious. So that doesn't even need saying. So, FPOS is probably the game changer in a number of ways. But certainly people who in the past would have said, oh, I'm sorry, I don't have the cash, I'll come back later, but don't always come back for what is often a relatively small purchase, they're able to make their purchase straight away. And because we've been encouraging people not to use cash because of COVID as part of our COVID safe plan, I think it is. We were told that we could expect an increase of 20 to 30% in turnover once we went to FPOS, and that appears to be the case, even though we're running 1 day less per week. So that's good news. It also means less banking, less security issues in terms of cash handling, all the rest. Anglicare North Coast has been helping out. This doesn't really go into our budget, but Anglicare North Coast, as we'll see later on, they pay for all the food that comes for the food pantry, and that's roughly $500 a week that they pay. They don't give us the $8,000, but they pay that bill. So that's not income to the parish, but for those who are wondering how do we pay for the food in the pantry, Anglicare North Coast uses Commonwealth Government emergency relief money to pay for that. So that hasn't really impacted on our budget, but it's been a significant relief of any costs that we might otherwise have. And then the game changer, we've had, according to the figures, we're $68,000 ahead of where we thought we would be at the end of July with additional donations and special gifts. So people in the parish have dug deep and have given us an extra, like some people gave us their $750 money, cash splash from the government. Some people came in with and wrote checks for a few $1,000s here or whatever. At one stage, I literally had a man walk up and say, God told me to give you this, and he handed me an envelope that had $500 in cash in it. So I said, please talk to God more often. Maybe she'll send you back next week, but he hasn't been back yet. So people have just really done an amazing job. So we're on the income from additional donations and special gifts relative to budget. We're about $68,000 ahead of budget, which is fantastic. I mean, it's just stunning that the cathedral community has achieved this. It more than offsets any shortfall in the offerings. Clearly, offerings are down by about 5,000, but special gifts are up by 68. So that's good news. So the summary of that is that we have had some substantial losses on the recurrent income side with funerals and offerings and catering and so on. We've had a huge amount, really good assistance from the diocese and through JobKeeper. The op shop is doing much better than it had been doing previously. And we've had these amazing gifts from parishioners who really have changed our financial situation. The challenge, of course, is we've still got, 4 or 5 months or so to get through this, and there's no likelihood that COVID-19 is going to let go of us even after Christmas. So we're in a pretty tight, challenging space. So that's my summary of the big picture items, and that doesn't, because I've never actually seen the final number, but there is some money coming as well, of course, from the sale of the furniture, which has been in the Hunt Hall until recently, but I haven't actually seen any numbers for that. Okay, so any other questions or comments from people? We have Alex here, Robbie's here, and Derek's here, so we've got the finances well and truly covered for wisdom, at least, if not for cash.
No questions, Greg, but that additional donation and bequests of 68,000 is quite incredible.
Yeah. It really has been a huge help.
Yeah. And JobKeeper should continue, should it not?
JobKeeper, we've got at least another 2 months of JobKeeper at the present rate, and then JobKeeper reduces to $1,200 a fortnight, and then I think around about January it drops back to $1,000 a fortnight, or maybe it's March. It's being phased down. I mean, I don't need to tell you that, of course, but just for everybody else. The other thing is we're not entirely sure whether parishes will continue to be eligible for JobKeeper. And secondly, it may not have been intended that this money would support churches and charities and community groups. That may have been an unintended act of goodwill that the government may close that loophole. They are under some pressure to stop funding religious organisations through the JobKeeper program. But because the diocese is a business that pays tax and has payroll tax and so on, we do qualify at the moment. And not every diocese was structured in a way that they could benefit from JobKeeper. Some dioceses, I know from talking with other cathedral deans, some dioceses have had no benefit at all from JobKeeper because they weren't set up like we are with a sort of central pay office. And it was left to each parish to qualify for JobKeeper. And it was just too much. Whereas we're fortunate that, as with a few other dioceses, Grafton Diocese has all of these things centralised. And so because of Chris Nelson's leadership, we were able to jump in straight away and right from day one qualify for JobKeeper. And that's made a huge difference. Well, I mean, it's more than offset the loss of income from offerings, and probably offerings and funeral losses have been more or less offset by JobKeeper, I guess. Yeah. Alex, does that sound anything like the parish books that you're managing, or have I totally misrepresented things?
No. That's a pretty good summary. But I guess we need to know that without JobKeeper, though, we are going to be in significant trouble. So hopefully JobKeeper in some form continues. Otherwise, we would really then have to look at scaling down some of our expense items.
Yeah.
But at the moment, JobKeeper's keeping us afloat quite nicely.
Okay. Any other questions perhaps from people I can't see that got questions? Okay. Well then, so this was the hard sell about the app. So obviously, one of the things we need to do, if we're not going to be seeing people in church as often as we used to do, then we really can't just rely on offering envelopes being delivered in person and collected just before the offertory hymn or during the offertory hymn. So we do have to encourage people, if they're using envelopes, to bring them in periodically, to get onto direct debit, which they can do through Anglican Funds, Grafton Diocese, or to move across to mobile giving, which means from their phone or their laptop or their iPad or whatever, they can set up a recurring gift or they can make a once-off gift. And I think this will become increasingly important in the years ahead. All right. So that was money. I thought we should do an update on what's happening to the properties, the buildings, the heritage buildings. So I thought we'd start by taking offence, so to speak. So we'd start by talking about the fences. These photos were taken actually just before the jobs were finished, but two different fencing contractors at two slightly different times were replacing the fences in front of the cottages in Duke Street and in front of the deanery. As you can see really clearly as it happens, the fence outside the Greenway cottage is the same style of fence as the deanery, whereas the fence outside the ministry centre is a slightly different fence. All of those little historical things have been maintained, and we had about a $4,000 grant from the Clarence Valley Council towards the heritage fencing. Didn't go very far, but it helped. They finally got the plaques up for Bishop Gordon Arthur, Robert Gordon Arthur, and for Bishop Bruce Schultz and their wives. They've been in. Bruce and Jan's plaque was dedicated a few weeks ago. Because of COVID, it may be some while before we dedicate the plaque for Bishop Arthur. But slowly those things are happening. We believe there will be a contribution to the cost from the families, but we haven't managed to get the cost out of the stonemason yet. We made an advance to him before I came, perhaps late in Donald's time. We paid a $6,000 advance, and he's never come back for more money, but he's also never told us what the cost is. So,
Stay with him.
This is not a good way to do business, but he certainly hasn't asked for any more money at this point. And it's really hard to get any documentation out of a stonemason or out of this stonemason. Very minor. I mean, the scale of things, a much smaller task. The chairs in the sanctuary were literally falling apart and had become unsafe. So we were able to send them off and get them rebuilt. So they actually split them all apart, scraped out all the old glue, re-glued them and clamped them and so on, and then stained them. And they've been stained to fit in more with the darker furniture that's in the cathedral sanctuary area. They're no less uncomfortable than they used to be, but they're a lot more stable. They're not really chairs for sitting in; they're just chairs for looking fancy. But again, that was actually covered by a donation, so that's part of that 68,000, I guess, of special donations. The fountain. I wasn't down there at 6:30 yesterday morning to watch, but I believe the pump went back into the pit yesterday morning. I don't even know how to look. I don't even know how to open the pit, but I believe the pump is back, having been replaced and reinstalled. which means as you can see, there's one light fitting which has been nicked by a local person. So we do need to replace one light fitting, and then we can refill the fountain and resume normal operations. The costs of that, I believe, were covered by insurance. I think that's right. Is that what your understanding is, Alex?
Yeah, I'm uncertain, but that may well be the case. Yeah.
Okay.
Robbie may know more.
And the basis of the insurance
Yes.
claim was a couple of our kids.
Hello, Robbie's got something to say. Hello.
Yep.
Yes, that was an insurance claim, and the money came in months ago,
Oh, okay.
so it's sitting there.
Good. Okay. That's fine. Well, I think the pump's gone in now as well. So we've just got to replace the light and then fill it up and get it going. It's been kind of a parable of the cathedral during COVID, hasn't it, to have the fountain just sitting there, looking sad. Wow. And of course, the organ. This was partway through the preparations to remove the console or take it away. I believe there's probably, it's probably partly rebuilt now, but it went back to not much more than a timber frame, and it's been refilled with much more modern technology than what the 1970s kind of stuff you can see there. Robert, do you have any updates on the state of play, so to speak, with the organ?
Only, well, you just said it really. Basically, it's in progress. The last I was speaking to him, he was drilling holes for toe pistons, and all of the newer stuff is on its course, ready and going in. So, at some point in the not too distant future, Robbie and I will visit and claim some of the stuff from the old console as well, but inspect what he's doing.
Right.
Yeah, so
that's sort of like taking flowers to somebody in a nursing home, is it?
Yeah, that's
going
right.
up to visit the organ when it's partway through the rebuild.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's just to remind him that we did say the 16th of October is when we wanted it back by.
Absolutely. Yes. All right. I notice he's taken the organ stool as well. So that's something.
We only noticed that yesterday. I suppose that we'd not thought of it, but were only commenting on that yesterday as well. So yeah. That will look nice. I mean, some of the photos, the woodwork and some of the other stuff is coming up quite nicely because they're cleaning and polishing the brass surround for the starter key, etc., etc. So it'll look really nice.
Yeah, and that job is roughly at what 134,000 or 124,000?
Probably slightly less than that, but I was going to say 125 is kind of the figure.
So roughly 125,000.
Yeah.
And that'll be covered by some funds which are in the organ trust account, including a very large donation late last year, which is already in that account. I think that's right, isn't it, Rod? The money's already there. Yeah.
Yep, he says.
Yep, good. And then effectively tomorrow morning, we actually start work on the next part of the roof, which is that area there. Hopefully that yellow thing showed up on your screens. So it's the roof above the northern transept, and then the roof above the chapel, including downpipes and guttering and so on. Obviously there's a cathedral organ pipes installation in that space as well, so special care is being taken to protect the organ pipes. Camelia, do you want to add anything about this particular job? Camelia there? Nope. Okay, maybe she's dropped out. Okay. You got your mic on, Camelia?
Yes.
Do you want to say anything about the roof, chapel roof?
Only that the scaffolding will go up on Monday, and they will be leaving the north transept entrance and the ramp available for use.
Okay.
But I can't see any of your pictures.
Is there anybody else who can't see the pictures?
I can't see the pictures, Greg.
There's the
Okay, folks. Well, sorry.
No, can't see anything.
screen sharing you have disabled, it says.
Okay.
Nothing since COVID-19.
Okay, well, that's roughly when I started saying I might have to restart the machine because I didn't think. Okay, well, sorry, you've all been sitting there patiently, literally in the dark.
But we've had good audio description.
Okay, all right. Well, it would have been better if I'd been told that 20 minutes ago. We could have restarted. So I think at this point we'll keep going for the video, and hopefully the pictures will be on the video. You can watch it later. Sorry about that. Something happened that I lost control of the stop share. It's got screen sharing is pause, but I don't know how to unpause it. Hang on, there's a thing if I could just get to it. But yeah, for some reason the mouse and the computer are not talking to each other nicely. All right, I'll try to be very colourful. The next picture coming up then, which you haven't, I didn't realise you hadn't seen the other photos, is a grungy photo of the kitchen, of the sink in the cupboards in the choir vestry, flower vestry. And the next major job is going to be to refurbish that vestry, which particularly means the sort of wet area and of course the cupboards, replace the flooring. As part of all that, we'll also create a workstation area for the multimedia. All right.
Pretty exciting stuff.
Okay. Hang on. Now it's letting me. Now it's reacted. That's good. So let me go back to this
Yes,
again.
we've got a picture.
Yes, I hit the escape button and it at least let me control the pause button. Okay, so now you should see children, families and youth.
Yes.
But now I've lost the capacity to bring up any more photo. Oh, here we go. I can do it from the mouse this time. Okay, that's a lovely day for technology. As we know, we've had Leanne with us in this role since January. Again, Leanne's ministry at the school and the cathedral has been totally dumped on by COVID. So many things she had planned have just not worked out as planned. 50% of her role, she's Director of Mission at CVAS, and that's a very deliberately chosen title instead of school chaplain, because it says to the other staff and to the parents, this is something really important from the church's point of view and from the school's point of view. There's a Director of Wellbeing, there's Director of this or whatever. This says Director of Mission, that the school is actually a church mission. COVID-19, of course, has been, as I mentioned, a huge challenge for the school and for our children and family activities. Leanne has responded by producing a weekly video along with other educational activities for parents to do with their children. We've had the after-school program, which started just before COVID and then stopped and has restarted recently on a Tuesday afternoon. And in its second iteration, it happens at the school because that is then within their COVID bubble. And we have a Friday evening youth group with 8 or 9 kids, and it's been great to see some first beginnings of some youth group activity. And the other, I think the last point here is that also Leanne has been very deliberately, as we organise baptisms, we try to include her in that process so that she gets to meet the parents and meet the child maybe or the other siblings, build relationships before they talk with Camelia or myself about the actual baptism arrangements. So I'm delighted that despite COVID, we're actually managed to pull this off. And for the first time, we can talk about the Cathedral Youth Group. We can talk about the children's program. I mean, there are some really good stuff happening there. This has been partly funded by the school and partly funded by drawing on the John Vale bequest from 2017. Any questions about the children's, family and youth area?
Greg, where does the youth
group meet in the church hall?
It meets in the Edwards Hall, yes. And again, it has to have its own COVID and safe, well, any activity has to have a risk management plan anyway. But there are special, so it operates under the COVID safe plan for the parish centre, and the New South Wales health orders say that children and youth activities have the same requirements as a school. In other words, the children don't have to maintain 1.5 metre distance, but the adults do, which is the same as in a school. So small beginnings, but it's been going really well. And actually, it's good to acknowledge that, in fact, Bishop Murray has been one of the regulars helping with the youth group, going in, doing the children, doing the spiritual input most weeks. I did that last time around, but the time before me, Murray even took them on a spooky cathedral tour in the dark as part of their program.
How old are they?
These are basically teenagers from about year 8 or 9 upwards. 1 or 2 of them have driver's licenses. So a bit of a spread, but basic. Well, that's also. I mean, year 12s, year 11s, year 12s often are driving these days. So it's basically a middle and junior high and senior high kind of activity. And that's very much Leanne's baby. Well, actually, the idea came from Moy Jones, and so Moy and Leanne have really been driving this and putting a lot of energy into it, with great support from Bishop Murray, which is an extra bonus.
Spooky at night.
All right, OpShop. As we know, OpShop was shut for about 13 weeks, which is 3 months. And we shut it down. The parish council shut bookshop, OpShop, everything, because of the COVID situation. And remember, there were very tight restrictions on people working from home, people over 70 not coming out to do things. Slowly we're doing that, but yeah, at the time there were very strict, tight restrictions. I'll talk about the pantry on the next slide, but one of the things we set up while the OpShop was closed was the cathedral pantry. I'll come to that in a moment. The OpShop resumed operations on the 23rd of June, so to the end of July there were roughly 6 weeks of operation. Moy had started helping with the pantry, and then I asked her would she, and parish council agreed that we would ask her to take on the role of OpShop coordinator, which we'd been mulling over from a long time, what to do with the OpShop. FPOS facilities had gone in anyway because we were using them for the pantry, and so they were already in place, but we've just upgraded them a little bit in the last week or so. As yet, we don't have enough volunteers for the OpShop to be open on Wednesdays, so we operate Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and then Lynn and a couple of others are in there on a Saturday morning, but we're not yet operating on Wednesdays. In those 6 weeks, the average sales have been several $100s per week higher than previously, so that's good news. That's probably the FPOS factor, as we talked about earlier. And if that keeps up and we don't have to shut down again because of a COVID outbreak, we'll go some way towards making up the $24,000 that we lost during the 13 weeks that the shop was closed. Now, we did a lot of weeks at an extra $300 to make up $24,000, but I think we can anticipate we'll claw back some of the OpShop losses in the remaining 5 months from August till the end of the year. I think that's the end of my dot points. If I'd go one more thing. Okay. So the other thing Parish Council is in the process of finalising is to actually set up a subcommittee from Parish Council to run the OpShop. We're going to call it the Community Development Committee or something like that. And it'll not just be the op shop, but the op shop as a place where we do community development ministry for the sake of our outreach to the community. So obviously it includes the pantry, but it could include other things like, for example, maybe once a fortnight, having a bicycle maintenance workshop on Saturday mornings. People, dads, mums, whatever, can bring their kids down to the car park. Mark Cameron will show them how to maintain their bicycles and so on. While they're there, they might pop into the op shop on Saturday morning, pick up a few extra items and just build a whole set of community things around the op shop. We're thinking about having, say, a community garden, which is one of the ways of building a community. There are government and council grants available to help set up community gardens. So we're trying to make the op shop not just a place that sells pre-loved clothing and makes money for the cathedral, but a place that really is the focal point for our outreach to the community. And as deacon, cathedral deacon, this will be Grant's particular portfolio because it's a lovely diaconal ministry. Okay, comments, questions?
No questions, Greg, but just a commendation on that last idea, having community activities around the op shop. I think that's a terrific idea.
Yeah, thank you.
And bicycle maintenance, that sort of thing, is good.
Yeah, I mean, one of the ideas which we've had to put on hold temporarily is to run computer classes for older people so they can actually get online and stay more connected with their family. We had somebody who was offering to donate half a dozen computers, but they turned out they were rather older computers that I didn't want to be cluttering up the Edwards Hall with a truckload of 20-year-old computers that someone else was dumping. So I think we can rethink that idea and introduce it maybe late in the year, early next year, of running maybe 3 or 4 weeks in a row, run classes to help people use Facebook or whatever, emails, etc., and then leave it for a month or two, then run it again, something like that. So we'll see how that all develops. I should mention, in Moy, we've got a real treasure. She has a bachelor's degree in community development. She has a graduate diploma in project management, and she's doing her master's degree in community development. So that's quite a gem for us to stumble across just at the time when we needed it. So greatly appreciated by me. All right, let's go to the pantry then, which is sort of the first step of reimagining the op shop. Obviously, it's gobbled up the space out the back, which the op shop was using for storage and sorting, and so that's been one of the practical challenges for us. But you can see from the photograph, this is some fine construction work, which was done by our friend Alan Madden. Did this, I guess about 2 months ago now. We had some temporary arrangements to start with, and so he's created the shelving and the counter. We still have to get some other shelving against the walls so that we're not using the tables and there's more floor space. And we need to add some extra shelving for the op shop goods as well, because at the moment they're in the Hunt Hall. So the basic, the trigger for this was I had a phone call from somebody in the diocese, a senior priest in the diocese, who was asking what the cathedral was doing for people in Grafton who were really on the edge financially, people who live literally government, pension check to pension check. I know they're not checks anymore, but you know what I mean. And that, for example, this particular person said she ran into a lady that she knew who does life pretty tough. She couldn't afford to go in and buy, she can only buy enough household goods for 1 week. That's all the money she has. she can never afford to go and buy a large pack of toilet rolls and maybe get it a bit cheaper because she's just managing her few dollars from day to day, week to week. So it kind of was triggered by that. Well, I'm sure we can do something. Let's see what we can do. And it's kind of grown into a much bigger thing. We got a lot of really good support from Food Care, which is the Riverside Church food bank, food pantry at South Grafton. They gave us lots of advice, showed us how to do the ordering from Food Bank in Brisbane. Mend and Make Do, so Ursula at Mend and Make Do has been incredibly supportive, keeps bringing around supplies of things we can use. Anglicare North Coast has been really supportive. They helped us develop the concept. We collect data which goes back into their system, and they use federal emergency relief funding to cover the costs of all the food, which is roughly $500 every time we get a pallet of food delivered. And they actually do the ordering and pay for it. All we have to do is say, this is what we want, and Anglicare organises it. The rationale behind that from the Anglicare point of view is it's desirable to have multiple points around Grafton where people in need can go and have some dignity about they have a choice. They don't have to go to South Grafton and go to the Riverside Church and be given a Bible verse about Jesus if they want a packet of food. That there are various places they can go to, Salvation Army, the Cathedral, etc., on both sides of the river. So that's the kind of rationale which underlies the pantry. What it has meant is that we're connecting with a whole lot of people who we would never see inside the cathedral on a Sunday morning. But because of her background, Moy sits down with each of them individually, does an interview, works out what their family situation is, discusses what kind of help they need. We also have food vouchers that have been given to us by various businesses, and we have access to refer them to Anglicare for financial counselling, relationship counselling, etc. So it's become quite an interesting, sleeves rolled up kind of ministry. Again, not unlike what the parish pantry was many years ago, back in Peter Catt's time, when people would be interviewed and different kind of assistance given to pay power bills or whatever. And in many ways, this has taken our food pantry with the cane basket and turned it into a much bigger operation. So people are asked to make a $5 donation for their bag of food. If they can't afford that, that's okay. It's actually all paid for by the government anyway. But we ask people to make a $5 co-payment, if you like. Again, EFTPOS is there because it gives them a sense of dignity and it gives them a bit of skin in the game, that they're not simply receiving charity, they're actually purchasing. Now, they get a lot of food for $5, but at least they're making a small contribution as part of the process. So that's what's happening at the pantry. So it hasn't cost us anything other than the fact that we've lost the convenience of the store area at the back of the op shop, and that's an impact we're still working through. All right, pushing on. Synod, it just gets better and better. Synod 2020. This has been another place where COVID has wreaked its magic. There was to be a special meeting of Synod in June to deal with the restructuring proposals, and then the regular meeting of Synod was meant to be next weekend, at which point we were going to do all the regular Synod business. The June Synod was abandoned because of COVID. The regular meeting of Synod has been put back a few weeks, and so Synod is now going to meet on the 26th and the 27th of September, unless there's an outbreak of COVID, which means we have to shut it down. And that's a possibility. But at this point in time, we're looking at the last weekend in September. We were going to be meeting at SCAS, St Columba's Anglican School of Port Macquarie, because they have a large space. But because of changes to the health orders, that's not possible. So now we've gone to the other end of the diocese, and we're going to meet at the Twin Town Services Club in Tweed Heads, because they can accommodate us, give us plenty of room and so on. So we've gone from Port Macquarie to Tweed Heads.
Mhm.
The irony is the building, as some of you will know the building, if you walk out the front door, you're in Queensland, but if you stay in the building, you're in New South Wales. So I'm not sure what that means in terms of catching up with my family. Special arrangements have been made to address COVID-safe concerns, particularly distance. Everybody will be checked on entry both days, ask questions about their health. There'll be a temperature check, and there'll be no public gallery. So a number of things have been done to try and make it a safe gathering. They plan to live stream the majority of the sessions. There may be one or two items where we would ask the public gallery to leave. Well, in that case, obviously the live stream will stop. But if you've really got nothing better to do that weekend, you can watch the Synod of Grafton live stream. Should be exciting. So what's happening at Synod? Well, firstly, it's an election synod. This is the first session of the new synod, like Parliament. So this is the synod where we have to elect all the committees of the diocese. So Bishop in Council, Cathedral Chapter, vacancies on the corporate trustees, presentation board, etc., etc., panel of triers, beautifully named panel of triers, and so on. So it's at a time when everybody gets nominated for these roles for the next 3 years. Clearly, one of the items on the agenda will be the impact of COVID-19 on the finances of the church, how the diocese is travelling, but also how the parishes are travelling. So I'm sure there will be a significant amount of business to do with that. The really big topic will be the proposed restructure of churches and parishes, which will include proposals to close and sell quite a number of smaller, when I say country churches, every church in the Diocese of Grafton is a country church, but I mean smaller centres are like that. There's a list of churches that have been, after consultation with parishes and so on, have been identified for possible closure and sale, and some amalgamation of parishes to form more coherent ministry units. Now that's going to be quite controversial, quite painful for some people, and I'm sure that's going to be probably the most significant topic at Synod this year. And then in terms of our representatives at Synod, so I'm there as the priest of the parish. Alex and Grant are the Synod representatives. So that's the three from Grafton. Leanne will be there in her role as school chaplain, but so we'll have another person there, but Leanne is actually there as the Director of Mission, as well as our Minister for Children, Family and Youth. That's probably all I need to say about Synod, but I'll try and answer any questions or respond to any comments people might have. Okay.
There was something that was
Okay. All right then. Well, let's go. In terms of yes. Sorry.
Greg, there's something that I was just trying to think. There was an issue recently of, was it Glyn Davis saying something about it was a vaccine development, so on. Is there any comment on that?
Well, that's not on the agenda for Synod. There are a number of things always bubbling along. So, for example, Mark Latham, who's a member of the Legislative Council, is that what it's called in New South Wales, the upper house? He has a private member's bill about protecting people from religious persecution, which is really about giving churches and church schools permission to discriminate against gay and lesbian people. So that bill is with a select committee, and so different people are making submissions. There was one by the Archbishop of Sydney saying these protections are very much needed because we're all feeling very persecuted these days. It's hard to be a Christian in Australia. People are rude to us. There was a very different submission went in from the Bishop of Grafton, taking a different point of view and opposing or encouraging the select committee not to adopt the proposals being put up by Mark Latham. So that sort of thing doesn't get debated at Synod unless there's a motion about it. And this year, my sense is that there are a lot likely to be many private motions because we're very restricted in our agenda. We've got elections, we've got a restructuring, we've got COVID-19. My guess is there won't be a lot of, if you like, non-essential motions. So there probably won't be the normal list of social justice, human well-being type things. So, and that's where the vaccine thing would come in. Now, it doesn't stop someone getting up at Synod, moving a motion from the floor that this Synod expresses a point of view about Synod, about the vaccine. I think, yeah, and I haven't seen any statements by other church leaders, but I know there's been a lot of commentary in the media that actually all the vaccines for the last 30 years have been developed using human tissue from actually the very same fetus back in the 1970s. And so every vaccine we've been using for the last 20 or 30 years has been developed that way. Why is this suddenly a crisis? So there's obviously debate in the community, and Sydney has taken a side in that, along with the Catholics and the Greek Orthodox. I think other Anglican bishops are probably hoping it'll just go away and stop being an issue.
Thank you.
In terms of restructure and our parish, the main thing that's happening is they're wanting the parishes that are in the Clarence Valley to form a kind of ministry network while still remaining separate parishes, find things we can do together. And that if the restructure goes through, that'll be one of the things that comes into place for 2021, 2022 and so on. Basically identifying ways we can work together across the Clarence and help each other in ministry. One of the issues there, of course, is that South Grafton is very worried about its separate identity, doesn't want to be swallowed up by the cathedral. Then in terms of the parish itself, we've got the Church of the Holy Apostles at Copmanhurst, which is one of the churches listed for closing and selling. So there may be comments on that, questions on that. And there's also included in that is a proposal that All Saints Church be closed and sold. But related to that is a local proposal for the Anglicans and the Uniting congregations in Lawrence to form a combined congregation which belongs to both churches. It's both a Uniting Church congregation and an Anglican congregation. And possibly some of the money from the sale of the church becoming money to help with that project of one sort of combined Anglican Uniting Church in Lawrence. Now, all of that was put on hold because of COVID. It was developing really well in January, February, early March, and then COVID came along. The Uniting Church at Lawrence is not meeting. I don't think the Uniting Church in Grafton has a permanent minister at the moment. So a whole lot of things have just become too difficult until we get a bit further into the COVID situation. There are no other churches from Maclean Parish listed for sale, and there are no other churches from South Grafton listed for sale, although the Church of Wooli will be looked at again in a couple of years' time to see what the future is down there. Okay. In terms of restructure, now I don't have these numbers in front of me, and this is perhaps not a good thing, but in very, very broad terms, in the documents that went out as part of the restructure proposals for discussion, it's something like 40% of the sale is retained for the local area, 40% goes to the diocese for the Ministry Initiatives Fund, I think that's right, and 20% goes towards the special fund for meeting what we call professional standards expenses, in other words, compensation to victims of sexual abuse by church workers. Again, the final decision on which churches to be closed and how to divide up the money, that'll be on the agenda at the marvellously chosen Twin Town Services Club. So some of those things could change, but you can see why it's going to be a hot topic for discussion at Synod. So I think that's all I can say about the restructure at this stage. But yeah, feel free to, and again, feel free to keep talking to people like Alex and Grant and myself. We're all members of Synod. We will shortly have the business papers, because Synod's at the end of September, and Tuesday is September the 1st. So the Synod papers will be coming out in the next couple of weeks, presumably. All right. And that's the topic I was just mentioning. So this is more at the cathedral level. We have 3 roles that relate to complaints concerning sexual abuse. I'm designated as the compliance officer to make sure the processes are in place. Leanne, as part of her role as our children and family and youth minister, she's responsible to make sure people are aware of the issues and know what the processes are, and that we have good culture. And then we have 2 people who have agreed to serve as complaints officers, and of course we hope they will be totally unemployed. So Moy and Neville, we thought it would be good to have 2 people, 1 male, 1 female. They can't be the complaints officer cannot be somebody in a sense who is on staff, as it were, who's paid by the parish or church warden or whatever, or unless you've got at least 1 other person. So we've tried to cover that base as well. We're setting up an anonymous kind of email address that people can send their concerns to. We've got a couple of technical issues we're sorting out. For some reason that email forwarding thing is not properly working, but we'll get that sorted out in due course. And similarly, under the grievance policy, the church, so not to do with sexual abuse, but simply people who may have a grievance or a concern of some other kind. Again, Neville and Moy have agreed to be the contact persons that people would speak to in the first instance. And then we're hoping down the track that between Grafton, South Grafton and Maclean, we might have a team of 3 or 4 people who would do this work. They'd get to know each other, they'd get to know the processes, and when there's a complaint or grievance or whatever, it might be, if the grievance comes to us, it might be better for the person from South Grafton or Maclean to be the person who acts as the contact person while they pursue the grievance. So we'll just see how that develops as part of the ministry network. And of course, those people had to be familiar with the relevant policies and procedures, and they've all got to have safe church training for other reasons anyway. So that's the contact people there, and then that's it. Obviously, the thing dominating everything for us all this year, whether it's home or in church or in our business lives or community lives, is COVID. I think it's fair to say that every single thing we thought we had planned for this year has been thrown under the bus, called COVID, and nothing has worked out the way we expected. And that's true in terms of people's holidays, in terms of weddings, and any number of things. So this is the year when we've learned that actually we make our plans, but they don't always work out. And the essence of wisdom is to modify, adapt, and respond. My sense is that the cathedral is doing remarkably well. But I'm also worried if this goes on for many more months, as I fear it will, it's going to be harder and harder for us to pick up the pieces at the other end. So I do have some concerns about just what the cathedral is going to look like, say, at the end of next year, in terms of vitality and numbers of people and so on. So it's not going to go back to where it was. The question is, where exactly will we land? And we're probably going to have to do a lot more business, as it were, without physically being present with each other. And that's not something that comes naturally for us. All right. Well, thank you for taking the time. I hope the birds in the background haven't been too distracting, but they're quite loud where I'm sitting. They do love the camellia bush. They're jumping in and out of the camellia bush and having a great old time. So thank you for joining us. Hopefully we can rescue this and save it as a video, which then others might be able to look at later in the week, and we'll gradually get the information out, because these parish forums are about communication, having the healthiest, most broad communication as we can manage within the cathedral community. There's another fifth Sunday coming up, probably sometime later in the year. But hopefully this has been helpful today as well. So thank you all for checking in and participating. Even though I can't see most of you, I'm glad that you're able to make it.